Hey everybody, it's here again. So we talked before about all the wonderful things about the S2000 and why I chose it over some other cars. Now I'm going to take a chance to talk about some of the things that I dislike about the car. First of all, a couple of things that are easy to fix. Depending on year and options, the S2000 doesn't always come with a clock from the factory. So what I've done is remove the little door over the radio port, and I have an aftermarket stereo with a clock in the display so that the clock is always visible. The door, to leave it open all the time, it looks kind of strange. So to me, it looks better to take the door off altogether. Apparently it's a pretty common mod. Another thing that I was able to fix is, in typical Honda fashion, the S2000's horn, the factory horn, is pretty anemic. And fitting with the personality of the car, and also being that the car doesn't have such wonderful visibility from other drivers, it seems like especially a small car like this should have a loud horn. And also it's a loud car, so you want the horn to be able to overpower the sound of the car itself. Some things that are a little trickier, early S2000s until model year 2002, I think, had a plastic rear windshield, and it has the reputation of cracking if it's put up and down in the cold. Even if it's not very cold, even in the 40s, you get cracked windshields, and they also fog over. So they switched to glass, and if you have an early S2000, you can have the top replaced with one with a glass window. Another thing about the top is visibility. So with the top up, visibility past here is bad. And especially with the glass window, it's smaller than the plastic window in the early cars. But if you notice, you really can't see out the sides. So if you're coming to a fork in the road, you have to stop and wait for traffic to come in this direction. It's really hard. And if you're in a parking lot backing out, especially if it's in the dark, it's really hard. So this is the one situation where I wish that there would be an opportunity to put a backup camera in the car, but there's just nowhere good to put a screen without totally destroying the dashboard of the car, unless you do something with the rear mirror. So I just kind of make do. So also with the top, it has a tendency to leak, and there's drains on the side, and there's a rain rail around the back, and also there's a separate vent in the trunk which can leak. So I've had pretty substantial problems with leaking, some of which I've been able to fix, but some have to do with the rain rail and would require reinstalling the top. Alright, so some driving things. The pedals have little rubber nodules, and particularly the clutch pedal, because it gets all the action, they fall off. And this is a 2003 car, and I've got a bunch of them that have broken off. The aluminum pedal, the actual, what's left after the rubber falls off, when it's wet, it's slippery. And I find, especially in the wintertime, when I'm wearing big boots and they're wet, my feet slip off very easily. I have to be really careful about how I use the clutch pedal. So the pedals are kind of riveted, I think, in place. It's really hard to replace them. So that's it's a limitation. So let's talk about the final two things that I don't like about the S2000 that are that are very difficult to change. I don't like the race-inspired digital gauge cluster on the S2000. I would much rather have analog gauges. When you look at some of the other Honda products coming out of the 90s, I'm thinking of the Integra Type R and the NSX. They have really beautiful analog gauges, and I really wish the S2000 had some gauges like that. The number one thing that bothers me about the S2000 is the seats. The factory seats, at least on the regular, not the CR, the factory seats are leather, and the center section is a perforated leather surface, and it's slippery. And if I'm driving around, I feel need to readjust myself a lot in the seats, because the seats don't hold you quite in place. Also, the side bolsters on the bottom portion of the seat, they collapse over time depending on how careful you are in getting in and out of the car. I bought this car with about 75,000 miles, and the side bolsters on the driver's seat are partially collapsed, not terribly, but more than functionally. It just doesn't look good. And so I got some estimates on reupholstery, and I know I could put in an aftermarket seat that would hold me in much better, and I'm considering doing that. But it's a shame that the seats are one thing that aren't really driver centric. And there you have it. Those are the things that bother me about the S2000. And looking back over that list, some of them are fairly significant to the driving experience, but relatively minor concerns in what is a really great engineered automobile. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.